Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of the Afternoons with an Author. This is something which the Society for Contemporary Affairs Society at the LBS, National Academy of Administration, does every alternate week with the CSOI, the Civil Services Officers Institute, and the Value of Words Foundation at Dehradun. The Afternoons with an Author is basically a conversation with an author on a book which is contemporary, both in terms of the time of publication and also in terms of the subjects and the issues that have been discussed in that. And normally we have one or two lead discussants on the subject who are very well aware of the author, also aware of the book of the author. Today what we are doing, we're taking up this book, Khaki, in Dust Storm, Police Diaries 1, Criminal Colors and Political Assassinations, 1980 to 1991, by none else than a legendary police officer, Amod, who's also a police officer and also a votary of child rights and also a votary of human rights and also of everything that is good. A person who has deep faith and commitment in the constitution of this country and the constitutional verities that it represents. I'm joined by Mr. Nitesh and Alankrita Singh. Both of them are deputy directors at the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration. And Mr. Kanth himself is an alumni of this association. So in many ways, is the alumni talking to each other, the alumni and the current set of people working here talk about this. But before I ask the lead discussants to talk, I have not been able to resist myself from doing more than the role of a moderator. I'd like to tell you something about this book because it's been one of the most fascinating books that I've read in recent times because it gives you the contemporary history of India in the 80s and the 90s. Though, of course, he links his book back to the 1861 Police Act about how the act which was made to rule over a colony has now become mainstream. And it's only now that we started beginning to understand that a new nation and a new independent India needs new acts, not only for ease of doing business, but also for ease of living. And police reforms is certainly a part of the ease of living on which the Prime Minister has been giving a lot of attention. What I would like to mention is that in the course of his book, one learns so much about how the image of police has been affected by the insensitive way in which the Bollywood movies have been talking about us. It talks about community policing. It talks about how the political parties in the country have often sacrificed the long-term interests of history for short-term electoral gains. And that is a bane which I suppose every political system will have. But sometimes, at some points of time, we do need to put the national interest in forefront. And then he talks about one very interesting aspect, that is that, the police, administration, judiciary, and prosecution, we are all connected. So even if there is one part or even if there is one leg which is missing or if prosecution is not being as active as it ought to be, then the best of investigation will not yield results. So it's a whole complex of things that needs to get into. He talks about the Punjab story, he talks about IPKF, and there's also another interesting thing which comes about, and that is about forgiveness. See, how do we deal with, it's very good when people like, when Priyanka Gandhi and Markin's daughter bring in the element of forgiveness. But what does forgiveness have to do in the whole aspect of reconciliation, in the whole aspect of legal rights, in the rights of victims, in the rights of so many other people, issues about class, about community, about conflict. So here is to a very interesting conversation. And the format is like this, that Nitesh will ask a question, Mr. Kanth will respond, Alankrita will ask a question, Mr. Kanth will respond, and this goes on for about 45 minutes to 50 minutes. So with these few words, may I request first Mr. Kanth to talk about his book for about 3 to 4 minutes before we actually get into the conversation.
So thank you, Sanjeev, thank you, Nitesh, and thank you, Alankrita, for inviting me here back to my alma mater after so many years, 1974. It's an ancient time practically. Well, I recall my days. I recall my days also when I was there. A little uncomfortable, Sanjeev, let me inform you. You are the director, the big boss here. And because, I had my own little worldview. I was a late joiner in the Indian Police Service. Actually, I was a lecturer. I couldn't make it to Patna University as a teacher because I had appeared only in 7 out of 8 papers in my master's. So I landed up as a lecturer in Jamshedpur. 1 year I did my teaching, which was a remarkable experience. And next year, 7 of us decided to start a college. So between Chaibasa and Jamshedpur, which was then and next slide done. And even now it happens to be the same. We started a college. So nearly 2 years I was deep into it. I recall one of my very close friends, Arvind Narayan Das, who had gone underground in Purnia, had surfaced in the same areas. We were all together. So when I got into IPS after 2-3 years of gap, the question asked by the local SP, that it was a matter of honor that you are joining IPS, but there is some background to you. I can see you more comfortable in the company of other kind of people. So that was there. Anyway, I joined IPS, and of course, I was in Missouri. I was in the National Police Academy. My worldview was slightly altered because of the background I'm giving you. So I entered police more like a reluctant cop, as I prefer to call myself. But I had an extremely satisfying police career, a very, very interesting, a very eventful police career that you can see. And I would have preferred to remain an actor, a performer, than to be an author. I didn't want to be an author, actually. But then thanks to HarperCollins, they asked me to write something long back when Harsh and myself were working for the homeless people. I had taken a leave long back, a study leave, to work for the homeless. It didn't work out. Then finally, Bloomsbury in past 2 years became very serious about it. I had written all my experience in the police and the connected affairs long back. All that experience was documented somewhere. And that document, actually, when Bloomsbury and others saw it, they found it interesting. And they felt the same way as you felt when I told about it now. So I decided to kind of write it. Very briefly, in one or two sentences, couple of sentences. See, this particular volume, as you know, is the first in the series of 3 volumes, which are second to 2 other volumes are yet to come. Well, it talks about that most violent decade of 1980s. If you recall, in past 50 years, no other decade was so bloody, so violent, and so difficult and dangerous as 1980s. Because, as you know, even prior to 1984 riots, we had Operation Blue Star. Before Operation Blue Star, we had a string of killings, political killings and violence going in Punjab, violence cascading to Delhi and other parts of the country, led to Indira Gandhi assassination, followed by Lalit Makam being killed, Arjun Das being killed, Jalles Vedya being killed. And all those cases somehow I investigated, because for 5 long years, I was Deputy Commissioner of Police of Crime Branch in Delhi, investigating these cases. So it went on, and for some time I worked as OSD in the Home Ministry of India. So I had a view, the top position view, in the sense that I saw the Punjab things happening, other things happening. Then, of course, as I joined CBI, the first important case that came to me was Rajiv Gandhi assassination. I was sent to Tamil Nadu. I was there for nearly 1 year. Then I worked on the case for nearly 2 years as DIG investigation of Rajiv Gandhi assassination. So this period talks about these cases. And of course, not only about the cases, not only about the riot or the pogrom, as I prefer to call 1984, but also about the contemporary socio-economic condition, the psyche of the people who are behind it. And in the same process, I reflect back, I try to understand the criminal justice system as it operated in the country, the role of police and role of other organizations also, other components, other stakeholders in the criminal justice system. That was the kind of thought process which has worked. In times to come, as you know, I'll talk about Jessica Lal case, BMW case, Harshad Mehta case, Hawala case. These are the cases I have done. So, well, that is what it is there. So since I had documented all that stuff in my diaries, the contemporary diaries which I used to write, it has come out as a book. And thank you very much, Sanjeev. You have invited me. We shall go further on it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. And over to you, Nitesh.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, this book is a wonderful read, sir. Sir, my first question is regarding the title, very title of the book. Sir, you have named this book as Khaki Dust Storm. Sir, is there any particular reason for naming, for giving this particular name to the book?
Well, I think Khaki, of course, is a term which has to go with it because it's about police. Dust storm is very clear that it leaves you hazy in your eyes. It leaves you hazy all around you. Whatever happens around you is very dusty, very chaotic. So that impression which I gathered behind me during the entire period was something, which was very dusty, very hazy, and very uncertain in a way. So I called it Khaki and Dust Storm. Okay.
Sir, I was looking up at some of your interviews, some videos and some printed interviews regarding this book. And somewhere I came across this thing that you mentioned, that this book is on 3 threads of thought. One being, you've expressed your thoughts on policing. You've expressed your thoughts on the socio-political impact of crime and terrorism. And you've expressed your thoughts on the nexus between lawmakers, law enforcers, and people who take the law into their own hands. So I think it would be a good opportunity for us to listen your views on all these three threads as they appear in the book, sir.
Alankrita, can I add the fourth one to it, if you permit me? The fourth one is that the society and the social sector as a whole, as it operates, Sanjeev knows it better than me, I'm sure. The social sector as it operates in the country and the sector in which we have operated, criminal justice system to which you have wedded for life, I think. Now, they can go together. There is absolutely no difference. For long 20 years, let me inform you, I started Prayas in 1988. For exactly 20 years, I simultaneously worked deeply in the social sector and deeply in the government and the police, and of course, the criminal justice system. So this is something which can go simultaneously. You understand that. Coming back to the points you mentioned, I mean, yes, I think I have talked about the events. I have talked about the incidents and events in great detail. It's an authentic account. Everything is authentic in the book. Everything is real in the book, except two things you must have seen in the beginning. I have given a disclaimer in which I said that, by chance I introduced a character called Aradhana Hurtikar, who is a fictional character, and the name of some magazine she works for. Otherwise, whatever was written in my contemporary diaries, event-wise, incident-wise, I have narrated them. And I thought initially, and perhaps I had an apprehension that why should people read all these things? I mean, these kind of facts, hardcore facts. But now I understand that most of the people, even very, very eminent people like Mr. N.N. Bohra and Shyam Sharan and Mr. Arun Shourie, for example, who participated 4 days back in a discussion on this book, even they felt, and others like him, Vinod Dua and Salman Khush and others, all of them felt that these are very important. These events as they are portrayed are very important, because most of the books, most of the writings do not really carry the hardcore facts. Right in the beginning, Sanjeev was talking about the kind of fictional stories and stories about the Bombay films and the political kind of appreciation or understanding of all these events. So this is what it is. And coming back to the political mafia or the political situation and of course the policing, well, one or two thoughts come to my mind straight away. And I think the contemporary and the police officers who will join the service later and others in the government civil service also, we have to understand that, well, this country has a parallel system running. On the one hand, you have the political hierarchy, the democratic institutions from panchayat to parliament. On the other side, you have got a bureaucratic hierarchy also, led by, let's say, cabinet secretary or top, the prime minister himself is a bureaucrat in a way, down to Patwari. And they go simultaneously. And so obviously the political features or the political interface of the government is something which is extremely relevant. It's extremely correct. There's no contradiction. I don't find any contradiction. And well, I think if somebody says that the political masters or the leaders or the politicians have disturbed them beyond repair and they have really brought a situation where they could not function, well, I think that's their privilege also. They have a right to come. It is our way of thinking, whether, I mean, in all the three areas, I would like to say that you mentioned that, well, a policeman or any government servant for that reason is totally guided by law. I have unswerving faith in the Constitution of India, in the rule of law. And I think that it's our duty to function according to law. And the Indian legal system, except the archaic system, which I very strongly decry now in the context of criminal justice system and policing. Otherwise, the Indian laws, which are governed by the Constitution of India, are extremely relevant today. And you have no business to digress from them. So there we are. We are supposed to be agents of law, the enforcers of law, the real kind of people who understand the law and its nuances and follow it in that spirit. And on the other side, these factors are there that you talk about. There is no contradiction. You understand that there is no contradiction. It all depends on us that how do we carry ourselves forward and be truthful to ourselves and be truthful to the system and the legal process. Okay.
Sir, in your book, you have talked about your experiments with community policing. And in fact, you go on to see that, however, my experiments were not accepted by many of my colleagues. In fact, my experiments were rejected by many, including police leaders. So what is the reason behind this?
See, actually, if you recall, if you go back into the history, the hardcore work, which should not go in the name of community policing now. Let's say working for the children, the juveniles and the vagrants and the children in extremely difficult circumstances. Let's say the children or youth in the drugs. These are some of the areas which are not part of community policing. They are part of the policing now. Kiran Bedi, my contemporary, she was senior to me by 2 years, and myself. We started 2 organizations together. I started Prayas in 1988. Kiran started Navjyoti Foundation. You might have heard about it. Same year, we started almost in the same place. In both these organizations, initially the Commissioner of Police Delhi happened to be the president. So it was part of the police function. And we started off like that. Now, Prayas has traveled a long way from that point, in the sense that from a couple of police men and women at very junior level, constables, head constables type. Then Shramik Vidyapeeth was an organization of Ministry of Juvenile Justice that time, and they joined hands. Delhi School of Social Work joined hands. So we created a kind of body between Delhi Police, Delhi School of Social Work, and Shramik Vidyapeeth, and the organization started growing. And of course, it has taken a shape today that there are over 150 centers, as you know, 9 states, 10 states of India. We have 40 homes we run. We have nearly 70 centers for vocational training, a lot of health programs across the country. All that we are doing now. So it is no more community policing. You understand that? I mean, it is part and parcel of the governance. It's part and parcel of police also at many places. But when we started off all these things, well, it was felt in those times that, well, I think it is not something that gels with the police. Actually, 1988, I started. 1989, the society got registered. Prayas I am talking about. And 1990 onwards, for 2 years, I was deep into Home Ministry and Rajiv Gandhi case. So some other people joined the organization. I mean, they took over the organization, and the policemen felt that it was an aberration. It was not something which goes with the policing. They almost decided to close it. Then came the Delhi University professors. The Delhi School of Social Work came. They said, no, it is not your baby anymore. We are also part of it. And they decided to revive and run the organization. Now, of course, I am saying that community policing is no more that cliche, that kind of peripheral kind of policing. It's a hardcore part of hardcore policing. That is why I think, Alankrita, people like you youngsters would appreciate it. That now, let's say if a rape takes place, or let's say the case of Nirbhaya, for example, or such other cases, they occupy the center stage now. They occupy even the mainstream media. They are talked about more in the media than, let us say, the traditional and conventional crimes of murder and dacoities. They are far more important. So what I'm trying to say that the community participation of the police and the issues that disturb the community, the issues which are connected to community, the problem-oriented policing, the community-oriented policing, these kind of things are gradually becoming part of the main police system, which is absolutely necessary. In my times, when we were trying to develop these ideas, it wasn't so. So that was there. In fact, I had 2 opportunities of preparing documents for, there is something called national meeting which takes place of IGPs and DGPs. A conference takes place where Prime Minister, President, all of them participate. On 2 occasions, once I presented something on community policing, maybe 30 years back. On 1 occasion, I presented something on trafficking and juvenile justice. Let me inform you that about 20-25 DGPs who were part of that process, I was assigned the work to conduct a small research and present in the annual conference. Well, it wasn't, nobody took it so seriously. They were not so happy about the whole thing. I collected the instances and practices of community policing from across the country, presented it, trying to make a point that community policing was very important. So then it was considered to be, kind of softer kind of policing or peripheral policing and not the mainstream policing. Things are changing. Now I think they are becoming mainstream policing. That's what I say, okay?
Right, sir. So what was erstwhile known as community policing is now hardcore policing, and every police officer needs to focus on these aspects. Completely agree with you, sir. Moving on to the next question, sir. You've been a government officer for decades. You have held very important positions, and you would have access to a lot of information, sometimes sensitive information. Very important decisions were made by you in your official capacity. So was there ever a dilemma when you were writing this book? What to include, what not to include, how much to disclose, how much not to, and how to go about disclosing things?
Well, I think this dilemma partly prevented me from publishing it. As I told you that HarperCollins signed me for this book way back. I remember Harsh Mandare and myself were working together on Homeless. That was the time they signed me way back, 2004, 5 or 6, something like that. I wrote all about it. Most of documentation I did. Then I took over as the first chairman of Child Rights Commission in Delhi, you might be knowing. So that took me to 2012. So nearly all these years passed. I did not really want to publish a lot of things in those times. And now again, let me inform you that all that I wrote is not being published so far. Not that I'm holding up that information, but then, well, I think it may create, because as you know, I'm writing about individuals, actual incidents I have brought out. Well, I think there are individuals, a lot of individuals who are connected to me. I mean, a couple of thousand names are there in this chapter, and many more will come next. Majority of them, large number of them are alive. They are very much there. And they have reasons to react. I think in 1984 riots, as you know, that I have written about the politicians, about the people who were subjected to a lot of inquiry, and then they were indicted, many of them. There are police officers who were also indicted, and I have written about them. And I have written about them, they can react. Fortunately, not many have reacted. Rajiv Gandhi case, for example. In Rajiv Gandhi case, I told it and I am saying again that it was almost like killing him, in the sense that the intelligence failure was not only a failure, it was something which was happening in front of everyone. People knew something like this is going to happen. And he was standing target, and then the man was killed. So these are the issues, you know, which are contemporary. Probably while in service, probably while connected to the government, I didn't want to publish it. But now they are in the public domain, because a major part of it, that's the point where I'd like to clarify as an answer to your question. That major part of it happened to be in public domain in some form. Major part of it. And that is why, you know, this public domain, while something is in public domain, probably it becomes easier. I was saying that most of the material which is now in the book, they happen to be in public domain. Even the hardcore, let's say, intelligence or information about, let's say, Rajiv Gandhi case, or maybe other cases which I have dealt with, they were at some time or the other in public domain. The point is that they were not really connected and they were not brought together. So what I have really done, that I have brought them together, and it serves a purpose. It serves a purpose because people like you, or the investigators, or those who are connected to these kind of events on day-to-day basis, probably they might draw a lesson. So, well, I'm quite comfortable. Yes.
In fact, I would go on to add that this is very relevant, because in fact, all over the world, there is the 30-year, 40-year archival rule. In fact, most material must come in the public domain, because unless we know what was happening, I mean, the way in which it has been brought out, the reluctance of the political leadership to take on if we had acted when Atwal was killed in Punjab in Golden Temple, then maybe history would have been different. Maybe lesser deaths would have taken place. So it's very important for us to learn from history. And the best way to learn from history is to document it. In fact, all over the world, especially in the UK and other places, every material which is 40 years old is declassified and it is brought in the public domain. It's going to take a long time for us to perhaps open up our archives, but I think memoirs like this are very important, because they relate to us about some aspects of our own country, about our own failures, and unless we learn from our own failures, we will not improve. And one thing is for sure, that we have learned a lot. In fact, a lot of these structures that have come up, whether it is the NSG, whether it is the coordination meetings that are happening, whether it is the focus now on prosecution. In fact, he has pointed out that except for one of the judges, you mentioned Vinod Kumar, none of the others were interested. Even if you have a very good investigation, if everything is running well, you have a judicial system which blocks up everything. So again, the focus has to be, we have learned now that we have to focus on prosecution. And finally, after a long time, this time in the district assignment, we've given a review of prosecution cases for the IAS officers in the district, because they must know where the bottleneck lies, because it is not just crime investigation, it is also prosecution of the crime, which plays a very important role. So I think it's been very wonderful that you've documented this work. Thank you. Over to you.
You are correct, sir. I think just a sentence on what Sanjeev you said. This is absolutely correct. That this kind of contemporary history, it's a contemporary history, contemporary documentation. 50 years is not such a long time, which is still going on. I mean, most of these cases, most of these events have something to do even today in some form. So it should be discussed. I mean, and should be discussed from completely factual narrations. Because most of the narrations which have been given on these cases, if you look around, you will find, is not factually so in such detail as I have given. So probably there is a need to put it across the people who should benefit out of it. Thank you. Thank you, Sanjeev. Please, Ben.
So now I come to the volatile decades of 1980s and the role of police. Sir, why did Delhi police fail to imagine the crisis of 1984 when there were clear signs visible? Assassination of leaders like Sattok Sikh Sandhu, Nirankari Baba. Then there were series of bomb blasts. There were riots in the walled city. So why did you think that Delhi police failed to imagine the crisis?
No, actually, I think not only Delhi police, the entire Indian police in some form is to be questioned about it, that why was it like this? If we had some brilliant, outstanding officers who were leading this country's police forces and police services, the why it happened? Because see, decidedly Delhi police was terribly ill-equipped. At that point of time, let me inform you, which I have written also, that we had just about 30 to 40 police control room vans moving across the city. It was still more than 1 crore population. It was a huge city. Now it's about 2 crore. Now there, with such a small number of police vans, they could not have managed, number one. Secondly, the force was very small in those times. Today, Delhi police is 85,000 plus. It's perhaps the largest metropolitan police force in the world today. And we have at least 5,000 to 6,000 police vans which are cruising all over the city. That was there. But that is not the only thing. Probably the will to fight it back, the will to contain the violence, the will to control the riot, I think somewhere it was missing. And part of it, I definitely lay at the doorsteps of the leadership, because the leaders have to act frontally. Not that I was very comfortable about my own role. In 1984, I was Deputy Commissioner of Police, Central Delhi, which is almost heart of Delhi, a very sensitive area full of mixed population. And I thought in those times as if I had not really succeeded. It's only in hindsight, subsequently, I learned that my district was appreciated. I even got a gallantry award for that period, which is most unusual. So this is something, which preparations were lacking, equipments were lacking. Leadership, of course, was not successful from that point of view. And then, of course, when you talk about the political atmosphere, I think the party in power was too powerful in the first place. Indira Gandhi's death generated unprecedented emotional upheaval. There's no doubt about it. I will not go and kind of support Rajiv Gandhi's statement as such when he said that banyan tree was falling and earth shaked and things like that. That is a separate issue. But the fact remains that the emotional upsurge or the upheaval happened, and people were prepared to do it. And another factor which I have brought out in the book is about the peculiar kind of complexity in the life of Delhi. Delhi haves and have-nots. Big cities have this character. Even Bombay has this character, but Delhi's character is very peculiar. If you see in detail the trends of the riots as they took place, you will find that it was a mixed situation. In those areas where people had grievances, a lot of grievances against certain class of people. I've been very frank in saying that the Sikhs were a very powerful community. They had a brilliant track record of contributing and, of course, being rich and powerful and being so affluent and everything else. And they aroused huge resentment psychologically in certain portions of the city and certain kind of people. So this kind of conflict which was going on in the minds of people, it came out. It happens in the riots. If you look at other riots also, such things are not so unusual. It happens. But here was, the dimension was very big. The dimension was outrageous, as you understand very well. So, well, a lot of factors which we cannot easily describe with regard to the failure of Delhi police, why it failed, okay?
But I think the important point to note from all of us is that, yes, there was a failure, but after that failure, there has been such structural reform and such infrastructure creation in Delhi that that kind of a situation cannot be imagined anymore. And there are learnings from Delhi police, which I think all police forces throughout the country, I know for sure that Calcutta police took a lot of lessons from what happened in Delhi. I'm sure all other police forces have also tried to improve on their preparedness and on their infrastructure. You see, Nitesh, the point is that what happened in 1984 was a very, very different situation. I mean, nobody anticipated it. I was a student in JNU at that time. Nobody could have thought that. Nobody could have thought that the outburst will take such forms. Certainly, there was a failure of policing. There was also a failure of political leadership, and the whole complex of factors which led to the situation there. But over to you, Alankrita.
Yes. Sir, because it's mentioned in the title, and you've also shared with us that you used to keep diary, and based on your diary, most of this book is based on your sort of journaling that you used to do. So, were there any other sources that you referred to while sitting down and writing this book? That's a very simple, just very easy question, sir, and so that we get to learn more about what was the process, how the book came about. And sir, I'm very interested to know how, as a writer, you think, what did you do to maintain that objectivity? Because we may have our own perspective. You were right into the thick of things at that point of time. So how, as an author, did you try to bring about an objectivity with respect to other authors, with other characters, with respect to what was happening, things narrated, etc.?
No, I was acutely conscious of the fact that every word is important. Every information I am putting in is important. So I cross-checked. I decidedly cross-checked. As I mentioned to you, perhaps I haven't in my book, but I was DG Police of Arunachal Pradesh, and that was a time where I had some free time. Although I traveled extensively, that wonderful place, and I had good time there. But then whenever I used to come to Delhi, then I'll carry a particular chunk of information. And all the material which I have been collecting or otherwise referring to for authenticity and correctness, I used to carry, and then of course write during that period, come back again. That's how I wrote nearly 400 pages while being in Arunachal Pradesh. So that was practically my last assignment. So this is there. So this particular thing was very important. Other point you asked, Alankrita, can you repeat it?
Apart from your own diaries, what were the other sources which you referred to while writing this book?
No, government records. The government records and let's say whatever material was available in various investigations to which I had access officially. And then let's say 84 riots, for example, Nanavati Commission report, then Rangnath Mishra Commission report and things like that, which were quite available. And coming back to, you said about that as an author, how do you maintain neutrality? That was the point you asked perhaps. No, it has to be an objective situation. See, even if you operate, that's a lesson for anyone, that even if you operate in most trying circumstances, we have no business to be emotional about them. An emotional civil servant or an emotional police officer or emotional person, I think probably is not able to do real justice. In fact, I would like to quote T.S. Eliot with boss Sanjeev Saab that the man who suffers and the artist who creates have to be slightly different in the sense that there has to be a gap. Is that correct, sir? Absolutely. I think that's what T.S. Eliot probably said, and that was the hallmark of his great creativity. Well, I'm not an artist at all, decidedly not. But then the distance that you maintain from the person who operates or the functions, I think that's very important. And the objectivity comes from that. And the second point I would like to mention that there's nothing so great about it. I have never felt for a moment that whatever I did as a police officer or whatever I have done past 33 years as founder of Prayas, well, it's all part of my work. I think it's a seamless kind of life which has gone on. I mean, as a child, as a young boy, as a grown-up person, as a policeman, as a social sector person, I think it's all a continuity. And I have been a little functional, practical, and prosaic, if I say so. And that has led to that kind of expression which I have done. No emotionality around it. Okay. Thank you.
So that is true. You might say that you did not have an emotional response, but the fact is that whether it was the setting of prayas or whether it was, talking to people or whether it was going and actually comforting people, there is an element of emotion that comes in. And I think one should acknowledge that emotion has a very important role. We are also, in spite of the fact that we are duty holders and we occupy certain posts, we are also human beings, and that aspect must be there. And I think you have it. You have that emotional aspect. You admit it or you don't admit it, but you have been emotional, and it is because of that the journey of your life, the trajectory of your life has been different from that of others who have held the same positions, others who have held the same job. Now let me take you on to a more philosophical and perhaps a larger discourse based on your book. That's your comment on Indian pluralism. The fact that India is a very plural society, that there is diversity in this country, that we need to tackle that we need to celebrate that diversity, the important role which police and civil services have for that. So that is one aspect which I'd like you to comment on. And then I'll also like you to comment on the fact that you mentioned that a lot of the time of a policeman or police force and also government is spent on a lot of VVIP visits, a lot of other duties which take us away from our core jobs. So whether it is the DC or the SP, there's a lot of time, especially in VVIP districts where we spend all of our time at the airports. That of course leads to a lot of bonding, a lot of bonhomie. But at the end of the day, something does get affected. So these are the 2 points I want you to comment on.
Sanjeev, you have brought out 2 very, very significant points. And probably it churns everybody's mind, my mind too. As a civil servant, you had such an interesting, glorious career, and you have almost come to a point where you will have free time like me.
Yeah.
And there are 2 youngsters sitting here, two young officers sitting here talking to us. Now, diversity and pluralism as it operates, as it happens in the country. Yes, not only celebration, it's part of our life. Whatever is happening, a lot of things happening around, let us not make political comments in this forum. But the fact remains that we have to travel a long way, and there's a lot of things to be done. The diversity and the multiculturalism and the multifaceted character of this country is something which needs to be brought into our day-to-day political system, bureaucratic system, administrative setup, and the policing and the criminal justice system. It is far away from there, far, far away from there. Let me be slightly radical in the context of the criminal justice system and policing. I used to think till recently that perhaps for reforms, police reforms, as let's say dictated by the Supreme Court of India in Prakash Singh case, or probably in National Police Commission Report 77, 1981, could have worked. Now I feel it may not work more than 20-30%. Because that archaic system, the byproduct of 1857 First War of Independence, which created Indian Penal Code 1860. Your this thing, sedition law came in 1870, Sanjeev. That was the same process and everything. CRPC, Evidence Act, Indian Police Act 1861. Why these damn things are there? They really cannot create a new society. They cannot create a new system. I think even people like me and you, let's say, and then even judges in the Supreme Courts have to refer to the law books every moment. They are interpreting everything even now, because perhaps nobody understands. If the system, if the clients and the participants and the beneficiaries and the victims of the system, if they are not able to understand the system, I do not know how can the system operate. So that is one part. The second part, which I thought as a digression I'll mention, our dream document, the Constitution of India. Following that, we have got hundreds of plethora of very, very kind of progressive social legislations, which are actually ahead of most of the countries. In fact, I had the opportunity to participate in the formulation of several laws like Juvenile Justice Act, Child Labor Law, and I find that These kind of laws are most unusual, ahead of their times. So this big gap is there. Can you see the gap? Archaic system of our criminal justice system, the bureaucracy also partly, and then the highly progressive system. So these are the marriage of the two is very, very difficult. So that is something I thought as a digression, I'll mention to you. A second point, Sanjeev, you said something about, can you recall again?
What I was mentioning is, you see that a lot of the time of the police and the bureaucracy is also spent on a lot of protocol function, and that again, I think you've answered. That's part of
yes, correct. No,
the British Empire had to live on symbols of power. They had to create those symbols of power, right? In a democratic society, we need to have different symbols of power. But we sort of, and somehow the other, I think that just like the political executive, the IAS and the IPS also bask in that glory of, pilot cars and, big houses and, and a little difference from the rest. So I think we need to change ourselves. I think the onus of change for the IAS and the IPS to change and to affirm to a new India is very, very important. And I think if we led by example, a lot of things would follow.
You are absolutely correct, Sanjeev. That is something which really very strongly comes to my mind. That if we introspect, if we try to understand, I mean, all these things, for example, that VIP is getting out of system, the way we operate. I mean, those sahabs that we created out of the British Empire, and those kind of ideas, those kind of postures, and those kind of systems that operate even now, is totally archaic. It's totally outdated. This kind of feudalism that prevails in the bureaucracy or Indian police system or the criminal justice system, including the judges, the way they behave, for example.
Absolutely, I think there is all three. I think and it is because of this that there is a degree of resentment against us, which also sometimes comes out when the Prime Minister speaks in the Parliament. But that is actually a reflection of what a lot of people feel, that we're just too clustered. So I think as Mr. Kanth has moved out, so unless we move out into the community, unless we talk to people, unless we go to areas where normally our job does not take us, unless we walk that extra mile, we would still be part of the old 1861 Act. Now, as he said, there are new acts, and there's the IT Act of this country. There is the MyGov application of this country. There is this entire wish to connect everybody on seamlessly on platforms. We are doing the right to food, the right to work, and at the same time, we have a very archaic system as well. So I think, and other than the bureaucracy and the police, I don't think even the judiciary will have that sort of ability to understand the term that is the nubs or the actual, the pulse of the people, which we can. And therefore, I think this book should stir a conversation amongst the younger generation of officers on how we should look at situations, because situations will always be there. How we react to them, how we handle them, how we look at them, and how we draw lessons from them, that is in our hands.
One small point in continuation to what you said. See, why do we exist? Why do we exist? I mean, well, I'm not quoting Karl Marx while saying that even the state should ultimately that should evaporate and go away. But the fact remains that all of us who are supposed to be public servants, we are supposed to exist for those who need us and who need us most. I mean, the kind of people, this country, despite we being fourth largest economy and being such a powerful country and things like that, I mean, the fact remains that 30 to 40% people live below poverty line. And we are a country of huge contradictions between poverty and prosperity. And there, our existence is for those who are poor, those who are have-nots, those who deserve us. Are we doing that? I mean, that's the question we should ask every day in our minds as public servants. I mean, that's what I want to add. Yes, please carry on, please. Thank you.
So before Nitesh asks the next question, so I think it's been, it's been a profound point made here that there is this huge gap between the laws. Like, we have the best of the laws when it comes to women and children. However, the system is archaic. I'm just re-quoting what you said. Now, sir, here in terms of training and capacity building, we do try to highlight this gap when young officers, and as an officer who's been in the field 4 years ago, I have been, at the forefront of implementing those laws and feeling completely helpless in terms of being able to do anything, being able to make any difference. So, sir, in terms of training and capacity building, what are your thoughts? How to prepare the young generation of officers so that they are able to handle this dichotomy that exists out there in the field?
No, see, the training and preparedness of the people who work at that level, for example. I mean, let's say a very small example. The Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act 2000 provides for every police station in the country to have, kind of special police officers, special juvenile police officers, special child welfare police officers. So nearly, let's say 30,000-40,000 such police officers should be in the country who are trained and oriented. It's happening. Now it's nearly 2020 when we made this law, and 20 years hence, one has to go back and find whether across the country in 16,000 police stations, we have got those kind of trained police officers to deal with children and juveniles. Well, I think the achievement level would be about 20%, 30%. But I am hopeful, Alankrita. I am very hopeful. I have found things changing because that's the advantage of being older. You go down and you see decades happening around you. I find that the level of implementation in these matters, where the orientation and training of the concerned officers was being tested. 1986 JJ Act came, 2000 we made the change, 2020 now, 20 years later. I find the speed and the progress made between 1986 to 2000 was much slower than the progress being made between 2000 to 2020. Things are changing. That way I feel that people are gradually realizing that the test of the training lies in what you do on the ground. The test of the training doesn't lie in discussions that we are having or we might have, let's say, in national academies or the state academies and, let's say, police institutions. We have to ensure that the work on the ground. I mean, that's the point I would like to say. Sanjeev, you would say better something on that.
I would say, you see, that the academies perform the very important role of at least bringing to fore what is expected. You see, because I think in your time and even up to my times, we were being told that you are knights in the shining armor. It is only you who can change the country. But I think now we realize that it is not we alone. We in partnership with everybody. We in partnership with the civil society. We in partnership with business. And that is big trust deficit. You see, one of the things which the Britishers did to us was that they made us lose trust and faith. So it was a system in which nobody trusted anyone. And it was a system built on fear. So the system built on fear has to be replaced by a system built on trust. And in that context, I think now, especially after the last two or three decades, we find that there have been many changes, especially changes in the way we look at ourselves, in the way we want to look at ourselves. More than how we look at ourselves, I think the academies can make a difference in making us think differently about ourselves. So I think that is something. We're running out of time. So one last question to Nitesh and then closing remarks from Mr. Kanth.
Sir, I will take you back again to the violent decades of 1980s and the assassination of then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. So you got this information from your wireless operator, as you have mentioned in your book. And the first thing which came out of your mouth was it a police officer? So why did you think that a police officer might have killed the then Prime Minister?
Well, I think that is something that enigma I have not been able to explain to myself until date. And my wife, Rekha, she was there with me on the gate. And as you know, all of you must have seen Daryaganj.
Yes.
Daryaganj police station, you see. Just behind police station, there was the house, the SP. That is the oldest house of SP. From that house to Deputy Commissioner's house in civil lines, the Delhi ended. Let me inform you, Sanjeev. That is the area where the city used to be there. So I lived there in those times. And I mean, there was a boundary wall separating my house and my office. So I said it. I said it partly for the reason, as I look back, that I must have spent at least 100 nights in the Prime Minister's house. We were, as young officers, we were supposed to do duties in the Prime Minister's house. I had known the family. I had known Indira Gandhi. I had known the family also. Subsequently, unfortunately, while investigating Rajiv Gandhi case, well, I was also, I knew more about them. Now, the issue is that a lot of thoughts came to my mind, which made me think, perhaps on the impulsive thinking, that none other than police officer could have done in the house. That is something, which came to my mind. Outsiders could not have come. And some kind of thought which came to me, which I haven't written about it, relationships. Relationships matter a lot between the VIP and the people who serve them. Something about that also, which I would not like to say further on it. Okay, but I said it. That's a fact. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nitesh and Alankrita. We've had a very scintillating conversation, and I think this is the kind of conversation that we need to do more often than not, because we need to introspect. We need to speak truth to power, power to truth, not just in a manner of saying, but based on empirical facts that are available with us on the table. So I, on behalf of the organizers, the Valley of Words, SOCA, Labasta, and CSO, I strongly commend this book to all those who are listening to us. Do send in your questions on the chat box, and all of us will try to respond to them, and especially because your questions will be directed to Mr. Kanth. Later on, after this show, after you've had this presentation, we'll request Mr. Kanth to put all his answers, and we'll put them on the website of the Valley of Words and also on the website of the Society for Contemporary Affairs. With these, let me thank you, Mr. Kanth, and for your closing remarks. We have still 2 to 3 minutes to go, so over to you, sir.
Oh, thank you, Sanjeev, thank you, Nitesh, and thank you, Alankrita, for this very, very interesting conversation. I'd like to say towards the end that when I look back my life and my work and whatever I did, I think there's nothing so extraordinary about the whole thing. It's a process, it's a system which I followed. As a young boy, I was quite a bad examiner, terrible examiner. So yes, I left one paper.
But you're not responsible. I mean, you were pushed into 7th row or something like that.
I know. So whatever it has been happening. One, of course, point which I have mentioned, I would like to repeat that let's not compartmentalize our life and work. It's one and the same. It has to be a seamless affair. And that partly explains if you decide to do some work outside your call of duty. Let me assure you, it is decidedly not only outside call of duty, it's very much inside your call of duty. If you decide to work, let's say in social sector, in voluntary sector, all of us must play that part. That's all I can say. And thank you very much. Thanks, Sanjeev. Thank you, Nitesh. And thank you, Alankrita. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.